Have you ever wondered what it's like to be pulled into a whirlwind romance with someone who has everything? A man who can give you everything, except his heart. What happens when a simple friendship crosses the line into passion and you're left wondering if you've lost yourself in the process? Stay tuned, because tonight's story is about to take you on a journey of desire, vulnerability, and the ultimate choice between love and independence. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that'll keep your heart racing. Elena had never imagined that a chance encounter at a friend's wedding would change the course of her life. She had always been the type to keep her head down, focus on her career, and stay out of the limelight. But fate, it seemed, had a different plan. The venue was a sprawling mansion tucked away in the hills, its grandeur almost overwhelming. Elena, dressed in a modest but elegant dress, walked across the marble floors, her heels clicking with every step. She wasn't used to the extravagant world that surrounded her. The laughter of the rich and the clinking of champagne glasses felt foreign to her. She was here as a +1 for a friend, not as part of the upper crust crowd, but when she saw him, she stopped in her tracks. Adrian, the groom's best friend, stood across the room, commanding attention without trying. He was tall, his suit fitting him perfectly, his features sharp and almost too perfect to be real. His dark eyes scanned the room, his jaw set in that effortless confidence that only millionaires seem to possess. But there was something in his gaze, something that made Elena's heart skip a beat. It wasn't arrogance or pride, no. It was a depth she hadn't seen before, a quiet intensity that pulled her in like a magnet. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Elena quickly looked away, feeling a flush of warmth creeping up her neck. She hadn't expected to make eye contact with someone like him, someone so out of her league. She quickly turned her attention to her friend, who was chatting animatedly with a few other guests. But fate wasn't done yet. Elena's friend, noticing her discomfort, waved her over to join the conversation. She took a deep breath, trying to act nonchalant, but her heart was still pounding in her chest. She moved toward the group, but as she did, she accidentally bumped into someone. She looked up, her apologies ready to fall from her lips. But she froze when she saw who it was. It was Adrian. "Careful there," he said, his voice deep and rich, with a hint of amusement. "You all right?" Elena nodded, feeling flustered. She hadn't anticipated meeting him like this, and for a moment she was lost in his gaze. His eyes were even more mesmerizing, up close, dark, intense, and unreadable. He smiled politely, but there was something in his smile that felt ... different. "I'm sorry about that," she stammered. "I wasn't paying attention." "No need to apologize," Adrian replied smoothly, his lips curving into that slight smile again. "It's a big place. Easy to get lost in the crowd." For a second, Elena stood there, unsure of what to say. She could feel the tension in the air, the pull between them growing stronger. He wasn't just some charming millionaire with a pretty face. There was something magnetic about him, something raw and untamed that intrigued her. "I'm Elena," she said, finally breaking the silence. "A friend of Grace's, Adrian," he replied, his voice still carrying that warmth, but also a certain edge that made her feel like he was studying her. They stood there for a few more moments, neither of them saying much, just exchanging quiet glances. There was no rush, no need to fill the silence. Elena found herself staring at him, unable to look away. The way he stood so composed, so effortlessly in control, her feel small in comparison. But the way he looked at her made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. "I didn't expect to meet someone like you here," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop herself. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Someone like me?" She hesitated, realizing how that might have sounded. "I mean, someone like you, someone who's, well, clearly comfortable in this world." Adrian chuckled softly, the sound warm and a little self-deprecating. "You'd be surprised. I'm more of a fly-under-the-radar kind of guy." Elena smiled, not sure if she believed him, but there was something in his tone that suggested he wasn't lying. They exchanged small talk for a few minutes, and before long, Elena found herself laughing at something Adrian had said. His humor was effortless, his presence calming yet electric. It was clear that he was used to being the center of attention, but he didn't seem to mind sharing it with her. As the night wore on, their conversation continued. She was drawn to him now, pulled in by an invisible thread. And as they talked more, Elena began to feel something she couldn't quite explain. There was a magnetic force between them, something that went beyond physical attraction. It was as if they'd known each other forever, but at the same time, they were total strangers. By the time the evening came to a close, Elena felt a strange emptiness in her chest. She didn't want to leave him, didn't want to say goodbye, but she knew she had to. "I should get going," she said reluctantly. Her voice soft. Adrian nodded, but his gaze lingered on her longer than necessary. "It was nice meeting you, Elena." And just like that, she was gone, walking back into the night, her heart racing. But as she glanced back over her shoulder, she caught sight of Adrian still standing there, watching her. His gaze was intense, almost possessive. And Elena couldn't help but wonder what it meant. It was only the beginning. But something told her this was a night she wouldn't forget. The days following that unexpected meeting with Adrian passed in a blur for Elena. She tried to push him from her mind, telling herself that it was just a fleeting encounter, nothing more than a brief exchange at a wedding. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, heard his voice, and felt that magnetic pull that had wrapped itself around her heart. It wasn't long before their paths crossed again. A few weeks after the wedding, Elena received a message from Grace, the friend who had introduced her to Adrian. "Hey, we're having a little get-together at my place this weekend. Adrian will be there. You should come." Elena hesitated. The thought of seeing Adrian again stirred up feelings she wasn't sure she was ready to confront. She hadn't heard from him since that night, and she wondered if he had even thought about her. Was he just being polite, or had there been something more in that look they'd shared? But curiosity got the best of her, and before she knew it, she was texting back, "I'll be there." The weekend arrived, and Elena found herself standing outside Grace's apartment, feeling an unexpected flutter of nerves. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but she wasn't prepared for the way her heart skipped when Adrian opened the door. His smile was the same charming, effortless, but there was something different in the way he looked at her this time. It wasn't just the casual politeness of their first meeting. This time, his gaze lingered, studying her with a quiet intensity. His eyes softened as he greeted her, and Elena felt a rush of warmth flood through her. It was as if they had known each other for years. Even though they hadn't spoken much since that night. "You came," he said. His voice almost surprised, but there was a spark in his eyes that suggested something more. "I wasn't sure if I'd see you again. I almost didn't come," Elena admitted, feeling a slight blush creep up her neck. "But here I am." Grace was already inside, chatting with a few others, and Elena quickly joined the group. Adrian stayed close, his presence always felt, but never overpowering. He had a way of making her feel like the only person in the room, even when there were others around. As the evening went on, they found themselves alone in a quiet corner of the apartment, the music from the party barely audible in the background. They talked about everything: life, work, books they had read, places they wanted to visit. Each conversation seemed to flow more easily than the last, and before Elena knew it, hours had passed. The connection between them had deepened, like a slow, steady burn that she couldn't ignore. Adrian seemed to be genuinely interested in everything Elena had to say, and for the first time she felt like someone truly saw her not just as the quiet woman from a modest background, but as someone worthy of attention, someone whose thoughts mattered. It was intoxicating, but there was still an unspoken tension between them, current of desire that neither one of them dared to acknowledge. It was subtle at first, just the way his hand brushed hers when they reached for the same drink, the way his eyes would linger on her lips for just a second too long. Elena tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination, that Adrian was simply being friendly. But there was something more there, something she couldn't quite place. And then there was the way he looked at her when no one else was watching. As the night wound down, the guests began to trickle out, leaving Elena and Adrian standing together in the dimly lit living room. The air between them felt charged, and Elena's heart raced in her chest as she tried to think of something to say. Something to break the silence. You know, I didn't expect this when I first met you, Elena said, her voice a little shaky. I didn't expect to feel so ... drawn to you. Adrian's gaze softened, and for a moment there was a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. He took a step closer to her, his presence overwhelming in the quiet space. I didn't expect it either, he admitted, his voice low and intimate. But here we are, Elena's breath caught in her throat. The chemistry between them was undeniable now, more potent than ever before. She could feel the pull, the desire that was simmering beneath the surface, threatening to break free. But she didn't know if she was ready to let it. I think I should go, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It's late. Adrian nodded, but there was a look in his eyes that told her he wasn't ready for her to leave. His hand brushed against hers again, more deliberately this time. Sending a jolt of electricity through her. I'll walk you out, he said. His voice steady but laced with something Elena couldn't quite define. As they reached the door, Adrian paused, his hand resting on the doorknob. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Good night, Elena, he said softly, his voice hushed, almost reverent. She nodded, her heart beating wildly in her chest. Good night, Adrian, and with that she stepped out into the night, her mind racing, her thoughts a blur. The slow burn between them was becoming impossible to ignore, and she didn't know if she was ready for whatever was coming next. But one thing was certain, Adrian was no longer just a fleeting encounter. He was becoming something more, and Elena was beginning to wonder just how far she was willing to let it go. The days following their last meeting were nothing short of torturous for Elena. Adrian's words kept echoing in her mind. The quiet intensity in his gaze lingering long after their goodbye. She had tried to push him out of her thoughts, but it was impossible. The more she tried to ignore him, the stronger the pull between them became. Her phone buzzed one afternoon. Message from Grace. Adrian's throwing a small dinner party this weekend. You should come. He asked about you. The words hit Elena like a wave. She stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back a hesitant response. Sure, I'll be there. She wasn't sure what it was about Adrian that affected her so much. It wasn't just his wealth or his effortless charm, it was the way he made her feel, seen, important, and, more than anything, desired. He had a way of looking at her that made her feel like the only woman in the room, as though nothing else mattered but the two of them. That kind of attention was intoxicating. And Elena had never felt more vulnerable in her life. The night of the dinner, she stood in front of her mirror, staring at her reflection. She had chosen a simple black dress, elegant yet understated, hoping it would convey the right balance of confidence and modesty. But as she applied her makeup, she couldn't help but wonder if it was even possible to hide the excitement and the fear that churned in her stomach. She arrived at the dinner, her pulse quickening the moment she stepped inside. The atmosphere was intimate, the low hum of conversation mixed with the clinking of wine glasses. Adrian was there, of course, seated at the head of the table, his presence commanding the room. He looked as effortlessly handsome as always, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. Good to see you again, Elena, he said, his voice smooth and deep, a hint of something unspoken in his tone. Elena nodded, trying to mask the flutter in her chest. Good to see you too, Adrian. Throughout the evening, they sat across from each other, their eyes meeting every so often, the connection between them undeniable. There were moments when Elena could feel his gaze on her, heavy and unrelenting, and it made her heart race. She tried to stay composed, but the way Adrian looked at her, the way his gaze seemed to undress her, made it impossible to focus on anything else. Adrian leaned in slightly, his voice low, just for her. You look beautiful tonight. The words sent a shiver down her spine. They were simple, casual, but there was a weight behind them, an intensity that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. She smiled nervously, trying to play it off. Thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As the evening wore on, the conversation became more relaxed. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that Adrian was deliberately leaning closer to her, his body language sending unmistakable signals. His hand brushed against hers as they reached for the same glass of wine. The touch so casual, so innocent, but it sent a jolt of electricity through her veins. It was as if he was testing her, pushing her boundaries without saying a word. The temperature in the room seemed to rise as the night continued, and Elena felt the air between them grow thicker. Adrian's subtle touches, his lingering glances, were becoming impossible to ignore. He was being careful, patient, but Elena could feel the underlying desire simmering beneath the surface, threatening to spill over at any moment. At one point, Grace excused herself to answer a phone call, leaving Elena and Adrian alone at the table. The silence that followed was thick with anticipation. Adrian's gaze never left her, his eyes dark and intense. "You know," he began, his voice low and smooth, "I've been thinking about you a lot since that night we met. I didn't expect this." Connection between us, Elena swallowed, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure where this conversation was going, but she knew she didn't want to back away from it. "Neither did I," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. Adrian leaned in a little closer, his face just inches from hers. "I don't want to rush you, Elena," he said softly, "but I can't stop thinking about what's between us, about how you make me feel." The words hung in the air, thick with meaning. Elena could feel the heat radiating off of him, the magnetism drawing her in. His presence was all-consuming, and she couldn't deny the pull, the temptation. She wanted to say something, anything, to break the tension, but the words caught in her throat. "Adrian, Elena began, but her voice faltered. His gaze softened, and for the first time Elena saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. It was fleeting, but it was enough to make her heart ache. He wasn't just the confident millionaire. He was a man with his own desires, his own uncertainties. "Do you feel it too?" Adrian asked quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "The way I feel about you? The way I can't stop wanting you?" Elena's breath hitched. She felt it more intensely than she had ever felt anything before. But she wasn't sure if she was ready to give in, to let him take her in the way his eyes promised. Before she could respond, Adrian's hand found hers again, his fingers threading through hers, his grip firm but gentle. The touch was a promise, a silent invitation to something deeper, something dangerous. Elena's pulse quickened, and for a moment, she felt like she might drown in the intensity of the moment. But the decision was hers. The temptation was laid bare before her. Adrian was ready, waiting for her to take that final step, to surrender to the undeniable attraction between them. And Elena had never felt more torn. The desire was there, the pull between them undeniable. But would giving in to it mean losing herself? Or could it be the beginning of something beautiful? The days that followed the dinner felt like an eternity for Elena. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Adrian, the way his hand had brushed against hers, the way he looked at her with that raw intensity, as if he was willing to devour her whole. She couldn't stop thinking about the weight of his words, how he had admitted that he couldn't stop thinking about her. But there was a part of her that hesitated. The attraction was undeniable, yes, but what would happen if she gave in? Would it just be a fleeting moment? Would she regret it? Would things between them change forever? Every time she tried to focus on work, her mind wandered back to Adrian's touch, to the way he had made her feel like she was the only woman in the room. The temptation was becoming unbearable. And then came the text. It was from Adrian. A simple message. "I've been thinking about you. I want to see you again. Meet me tonight." Elena stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She had been expecting something like this, but the reality of it still sent a thrill through her. The pull between them was stronger than ever, and she knew that this time she wouldn't be able to resist. "Okay," she replied, her fingers trembling as she typed dot later that evening. Elena found herself standing outside Adrian's luxurious penthouse apartment, her stomach a knot of nerves. She had dressed carefully, choosing a fitted black dress that accentuated her curves but still felt elegant. She wasn't sure what this night would bring, but deep down, she knew it would change everything. When the door opened, Adrian was standing there waiting for her. His gaze softened when he saw her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Without a word, he stepped aside to let her in, his hand grazing hers as she passed through the doorway. The air inside the apartment was thick with tension, the kind that made Elena's heart race in anticipation. Adrian's penthouse was as luxurious as she had imagined sleek. Modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city skyline. But tonight, the opulence seemed to fade into the background, overshadowed by the heat between them. They didn't speak at first. Instead, Adrian led her to the living room, where soft lighting cast a warm glow over the space. He poured them both a glass of wine, the act simple but intimate, and handed one to Elena. She accepted it without a word, her hands slightly shaking as she took a sip. For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of everything unspoken between them hanging in the air. Then Adrian placed his glass down on the coffee table and turned toward her, his gaze dark and intense. "Elena," he said, his voice low, "I can't pretend anymore. The way I feel about you, it's real, and I can't keep holding back." Elena's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, the electricity in the air between them. His words were like a spark that set her entire being on fire. "I feel it too," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I don't know if I'm ready for this." Adrian stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't have to be ready. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. But I can't stand this distance between us anymore. I want you, Elena. I need you." He reached out, his fingers brushing against her cheek, and Elena closed her eyes at the sensation. The touch was gentle but filled with an undeniable hunger. For a moment, everything felt suspended in time. Elena's heart racing, her body aching for his touch, yet her mind screaming at her to pull back, to stop this before it went too far. But Adrian wasn't giving her the chance to retreat. He leaned in, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, hesitant, as if both of them were testing the waters. But as their lips met, the tension that had been building between them snapped, and the kiss deepened. It was everything Elena had imagined and more. His lips were soft yet insistent, his hands moving to her waist, pulling her closer as though he couldn't get enough of her. Her own hands tangled in his hair, her body responding to him without hesitation. She knew she should stop. She knew this could change everything. And yet, when his mouth moved to her neck, when he kissed her with that desperation she could feel deep in her bones, all her doubts melted away. Adrian's hands slid down her body, tracing the curves of her dress as he guided her toward the couch. Elena's heart raced, her mind clouded with desire. And before she could second-guess herself, she let herself fall into him. They tumbled onto the couch, their bodies pressed close, the heat between them almost unbearable. Adrian's hands were everywhere, his touch both tender and demanding, as if he wanted to claim her body and soul. And in that moment, Elena gave in. She let go of the hesitation, the doubts, and the fears that had been holding her back. She kissed him with the same urgency, her body responding to his touch as if it were its own. She could feel his desire, raw and unfiltered, and it ignited something inside of her. But as their bodies moved together, Elena realized that this was no longer just about the physical. It was about crossing the line between friendship and something more, something dangerous, something irreversible. She was no longer just a woman caught in a moment of weakness. She was giving herself to Adrian, letting him take the lead in a way she never thought she would. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only Adrian, only the connection between them. And for the first time, Elena didn't feel the need to question what came next. She was too far gone, too deep in the moment to care about the consequences. This was their moment, their crossing of the line. The morning after was a blur. Elena woke up in Adrian's bed, the soft sheets tangled around her body, the warm scent of him still lingering in the air. Her head felt heavy, as if her mind was trying to catch up with everything that had happened. She could feel the dull ache in her body, the remnants of their passion still echoing through her. But there was something else there, too, a sinking feeling in her chest that she couldn't shake. She turned her head, slowly, finding Adrian still asleep beside her. His face was peaceful in the quiet morning light, the harsh edges of his usually composed demeanor softened in slumber. She had never seen him so vulnerable, so open. It almost made her ache with the overwhelming sense of intimacy they had shared. But as she lay there staring at him, a thought flickered in her mind, something she hadn't allowed herself to consider the night before. What did this mean? She had crossed a line with Adrian, one that would change everything between them. But what had it really meant to him? Was she just another fleeting desire, or was there something deeper, something more genuine? Elena pushed the thought away, but it wouldn't leave. She had spent so many years keeping her emotions at bay, guarding her heart from getting too involved with anyone. But with Adrian, she had let go, let herself be swept up in the heat of the moment, in the desire that burned between them. Now that the haze of passion was fading, she was left with the stark reality. She wasn't sure if she was ready to deal with the fallout. Adrian stirred beside her, his hand reaching for hers instinctively. His touch was warm and familiar, and for a moment Elena considered pretending nothing had changed, pretending that the night before was just another fleeting moment. But when she looked at him, really looked at him, she couldn't ignore the unease settling in her chest. Morning, Adrian's voice was soft, a lazy smile tugging at his lips as he propped himself up on one elbow. "Did you sleep well?" Elena hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, you. Better now," he said, his voice thick with sleep. But there was a certain intensity in his eyes that Elena couldn't quite place. He didn't move away from her, didn't give her any space to breathe. And that's when the reality of the situation hit her. The night had been incredible, but now she wasn't sure if she was ready for the consequences of giving herself to him. Not just physically, but emotionally. Adrian reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, his touch tender yet full of an almost possessive need. "Elena, she pulled away slightly, her body stiffening as she sat up on the edge of the bed. The space between them seemed to grow instantly. "I think I need to go," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian's face faltered for a split second, but he quickly masked it with a small, knowing smile. "Of course, I understand." But there was something in his eyes, something almost unreadable, that made Elena's chest tighten. She quickly gathered her things, dressing in silence, the weight of her own feelings crashing down on her. She couldn't look at him. Not now. Not like this. As she walked toward the door, Adrian's voice stopped her. "Elena." She turned slowly, her hand on the doorknob, but didn't face him completely. "I need some space, Adrian," she said, her voice shaky but firm. "I need to figure things out." He was silent for a moment, and then she heard him speak, his voice low and steady. "I don't want this to be a mistake. You're not just some one-night thing to me." The words stung more than she had expected. But it wasn't the sting of rejection. It was the sting of his truth, of the vulnerability he was showing in that moment. "I don't think either of us is ready for what this means," she replied quietly, still not looking at him. She left before she could hear anything more, the door clicking softly behind her as she stepped out into the cool morning air. The next few days felt like an emotional roller coaster. For Elena, she couldn't stop thinking about Adrian, about the intensity of their connection, about the way he had made her feel like she was the only one who mattered. And yet, despite that feeling, she couldn't shake the weight of uncertainty. She wasn't sure where they stood now. Had they just crossed a line that would make it impossible to go back to the friendship they once had? Her mind raced as she tried to focus on work, but every conversation, every meeting was clouded by thoughts of him, his touch, his words, his eyes. It felt like everything was falling apart, and yet she couldn't bring herself to call him, couldn't bring herself to make that first move. She knew Adrian wanted something more. He'd made that clear. But what did she want? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. But now it was no longer just a face she longed for. It was his heart, his soul that called to her. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. Adrian wasn't just a fleeting desire. He was a storm, one that had swept her off her feet and was now threatening to consume her. But the question lingered. Was she ready for the consequences of this? Of giving herself to someone like him? Someone who wasn't just a millionaire, but a man with his own demons, his own desires, and a need for control that Elena wasn't sure she could give him. The days after leaving Adrian's penthouse were the longest of Elena's life. She had tried to bury herself in work, tried to focus on anything but him, but every thought seemed to circle back to that night. The way he had kissed her, the way his hands had moved over her skin with such urgency, such hunger. But now, as the adrenaline from the night faded, Elena was left with the quiet aftermath. The confusion, the guilt, the doubt, these emotions had taken root in her chest. And she couldn't seem to shake them. She hadn't heard from Adrian since the morning she left. At first, she had told herself that it was a relief. She needed space, time to think. But the silence began to feel deafening. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart would skip a beat. Every time a message popped up, she would glance at it, only to find it wasn't from him. Her mind swirled with questions. Was he angry? Had she hurt him by leaving so suddenly? Or was he already moving on? Her insecurities began to surface, and she couldn't stop them. She wasn't used to feeling this vulnerable, this exposed. She was used to being in control, to keeping her emotions in check. But with Adrian, everything had changed. And now, she was struggling to understand what it all meant. Finally, after nearly a week of silence, her phone rang. The name on the screen made her heart lurch in her chest. Adrian. She stared at the phone for a few moments, her thumb hovering over the answer button. She could feel the weight of the decision in her hands. Would this conversation bring clarity, or would it only complicate things further? With a shaky breath, she answered. Elena. Adrian's voice came through the speaker, warm yet tinged with something she couldn't quite place. We need to talk. Her stomach tightened. I know. She swallowed, trying to steady her nerves. I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk. There was a pause on the other end, a slight crack in his usual composed tone. I've been trying to figure out how to say this, but I can't keep avoiding it. I need to know what happened between us. Elena's heart raced. She could feel the gravity of his words. He wasn't just asking about the night they shared, he was asking about everything. About what had changed between them, about what they meant to each other. I don't know what it means either, Elena admitted, her voice trembling slightly. I've been ... confused. Adrian sighed, and she could almost feel the weight of the exhale through the phone. I've never been good at this. At relationships. I've always kept people at arm's length. But with you, Elena, ... It's different. I can't just let this go. I can't just pretend like it didn't mean something. Her breath caught in her throat. She had been waiting for him to say something like this, but hearing it out loud made it real. And suddenly, the floodgates opened. The emotions she had been bottling up came rushing to the surface, threatening to overwhelm her. I don't want to hurt you. Adrian, she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. But I don't know if I'm ready for it. All of this. For whatever this is between us. There was a long pause, and for a moment, Elena thought he might hang up. But then he spoke again, his voice softer, this time almost vulnerable. I know you're scared, he said. I'm scared too. I've never let anyone in like this before. But I don't want to let you go. Elena, I don't want you to walk away from this. The rawness in his voice broke something inside her. She had never heard Adrian speak like this. Never seen him so open, so raw. And in that moment, Elena realized that she was just as scared as he was. She had never let herself be this vulnerable with anyone. Had never allowed herself to fall so deeply for someone she barely knew. But with Adrian, it felt different. She couldn't explain it, but she felt it in her bones. He wasn't just a fleeting temptation. He was someone who had managed to break through the walls she had spent so many years building around herself. I don't want to hurt you either, Elena said softly, but I don't know if I can give you what you want. Adrian's voice was quiet now, almost hesitant. What do you think I want? You want control, Elena replied, her heart pounding. You're used to getting what you want. And I don't know if I can be that for you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Elena braced herself for his response, but when it came, it wasn't what she had expected. I don't want control, Elena Adrian said, his voice full of something that sounded like regret. I just want you. I've always been able to control everything in my life, but with you, it's different. I'm not asking for anything more than that. I just want to be with you. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he wasn't just saying the words because he thought that's what she needed to hear. But the doubt lingered, like a shadow hanging over everything. I don't know if I'm ready for this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But I'm willing to try. I don't want to lose you. There was a brief pause, and then Adrian's voice was warm, full of relief. Then we'll figure it out together, one step at a time. Elena closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. It wasn't going to be easy. She knew that. But for the first time, she felt like they were both on the same page. They had crossed a line, but maybe they could find their way back to something real. Something lasting. As the call ended, Elena sat in the quiet of her apartment, the weight of everything still heavy on her shoulders, but the hope that they could make it through the mess of emotions and uncertainty lingering in the air. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't alone. The days after their conversation were quieter than Elena had anticipated. She and Adrian spoke every day, but the nature of their relationship had shifted. There was no rush, no urgent pull between them, just a slow, steady building of trust that felt almost foreign to Elena. She wasn't used to letting people in, wasn't used to the idea of sharing her heart so openly. But with Adrian, it felt almost inevitable as the days passed. Elena found herself learning more about Adrian, about the man behind the polished exterior. He wasn't just the confident millionaire she had first met. He was complex, scarred, vulnerable in ways she hadn't imagined. Every conversation revealed a little more of him as past, his struggles, his fears, and the more she learned, the deeper she fell. Adrian, too, was opening up to her. He was no longer the distant, untouchable figure he had once been. There were moments when his guard would slip, when he would share his insecurities, his hopes for the future, and his fears of being left alone. Elena had never seen this side of him before, and it made her heart ache in a way she hadn't expected. One evening, as they sat together in a quiet cafe, the air heavy with the unspoken tension between them, Adrian finally spoke the words Elena had been waiting for. I don't want to be just a fleeting moment in your life, Elena, he said, his voice low and serious. I want something real with you, something that lasts. I'm tired of pretending like I don't feel more for you than just desire. I care about you, more than I've ever cared about anyone. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than any confession he had made before. Elena's heart raced, her breath catching in her throat. She had known this was coming, had felt the pull toward him for weeks now, but hearing him say it out loud made it real, made it undeniable. I care about you too, Elena replied softly, her voice trembling with the weight of the admission. But I'm scared, Adrian. I'm scared of what this means, scared of losing myself in this. Whatever this is between us. Adrian reached across the table, his hand finding hers. And for the first time, Elena didn't pull away. His touch was steady, grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. I don't want to control you, Elena, he said, his voice full of sincerity. I just want to be with you. I want to learn to love you, not just as the woman I desire, but as the woman you are, your heart, your mind, everything about you. I've never felt this way before, and I don't want to let it go. For the first time in weeks, Elena felt a sense of clarity. She had been so caught up in her own fears, her own insecurities, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to truly connect with someone, to open up, to be vulnerable, and to trust that someone wouldn't break her heart. But Adrian wasn't like anyone she had ever known. He wasn't just asking for her body, for her affection. He was asking for her heart, for her soul. And in that moment, Elena realized that she couldn't keep holding herself back. She couldn't keep running from the feelings she had tried so hard to ignore. I'm scared too, Elena admitted, her voice barely a whisper. But I want to try. I want to see where this can go. Adrian's face softened, a mixture of relief and something deeper in his eyes. We'll take it one step at a time, Elena, together. No more running. No more pretending. As they sat there hand in hand, the weight of their emotions seemed to lift, replaced by something lighter, something hopeful. Elena wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she didn't feel the need to control it. She didn't need to have all the answers. All she needed was to trust Adrian and to trust herself. The next few days were a whirlwind of quiet moments, late-night conversations, and stolen kisses. Elena felt herself falling deeper for Adrian with each passing day. But this time, it was different. This time, it wasn't just about physical attraction. It wasn't about the spark that had first drawn them together. It was about the connection they had, built the trust, the understanding, the willingness to face their fears together. They talked about their future, about what they wanted from each other. Adrian wasn't asking for a commitment right away, but he was making it clear that he was in this for the long haul. And Elena, despite all her fears, found herself wanting the same thing. She had always been afraid of losing herself in a relationship, of losing her independence, her identity. But with Adrian, she felt like she could be herself, vulnerable, open, and yet still strong. She didn't have to choose between love and herself. With Adrian, she could have both. And as she looked at him, sitting across from her with that soft, knowing smile, Elena realized that this was the man she had been waiting for. Not because he was perfect, but because he was real. And he wanted her just as she was. The weeks that followed felt like a turning point for both Elena and Adrian. The tension that had once hung between them had slowly melted away, replaced by a comfortable intimacy, a deep connection that neither of them had expected. But as their bond deepened, so did Elena's fear of what was to come. The closer they grew, the more she feared losing herself in the relationship. But this time, there was something different. Adrian wasn't pushing her. He was patiently waiting for her to be ready. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Adrian's penthouse, the city lights sparkling below them, Elena found herself lost in thought. She had been questioning everything: the future, her feelings, their future, together and now. Sitting next to Adrian, she couldn't help but feel like she had come to a crossroads. Adrian, sensing her quiet contemplation, turned to her, his voice soft. "What's on your mind, Elena?" Elena sighed, looking out at the city below. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what comes next." Adrian's hand found hers, his fingers wrapping around hers in that familiar, comforting way. "What do you want, Elena?" he asked, his voice full of warmth, full of understanding. She looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, the way he was waiting for her to make the choice. It wasn't a decision he was going to force on her. It was hers to make, hers alone. And for the first time, Elena realized that she wasn't afraid of the choice. She wasn't afraid of what might come next. "I want us to be real," she said quietly. "I want to be with you, Adrian. I don't want to run anymore." Adrian's smile was soft, but full of joy. And for a moment, Elena felt like the weight of all her doubts had been lifted. She wasn't alone in this anymore. She wasn't running from the unknown. She was embracing it, embracing him. "Are you sure?" Adrian asked, his voice laced with emotion. "Because this isn't just about us having fun, Elena. This is real. And I want all of you, your heart, your mind, your everything." Elena nodded, squeezing his hand. "I'm sure. I don't have all the answers, and I'm still scared. But I'm ready to try. I want to see where this takes us. I want to see what we can build together." Adrian leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, a gesture that was both tender and full of promise. "We'll take it one day at a time." Together, the next few weeks were filled with more conversations. More late-night talks about their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. There were still moments of doubt, moments when Elena would pull away, but Adrian was patient with her. He gave her the space she needed, and in return, Elena found herself opening up to him more and more. She began to realize that love wasn't just about passion. It was about understanding, compromise, and trust. One evening, a few months later, Elena found herself standing in the same cafe where they had shared one of their first honest conversations. This time, though, there was no uncertainty in her heart, no fear of the unknown. Adrian arrived, his usual confident stride, but as he saw her, his expression softened. Elena stood up, her heart swelling in her chest. She was no longer the woman she had been when they first met in shore, afraid of being vulnerable. She had become someone stronger, someone more certain of who she was and what she wanted. Adrian stopped in front of her, taking her hands in his. "You've changed," he said softly, his voice full of admiration. Elena smiled, feeling the truth of his words. "I've changed because of you," she replied, her voice steady. "I've learned to let go, to trust not just you, but myself." He leaned down and kissed her gently, his lips warm and tender, filled with the promise of everything they had yet to experience together. "I love you," Adrian whispered against her lips. Elena's heart fluttered at the words. "I love you too," she whispered back, the words feeling more natural than she had ever expected. And as they stood there in that quiet moment, Elena knew one thing for certain. The journey they had started was just the beginning. There would be challenges, yes, but they would face them together. Because love wasn't just about the passion, was about building a life together, one step at a time. And with Adrian by her side, Elena was ready to take on whatever came next.